to the 5th episode of the yayQuery podcast, brought to you by TinyCDN and Devo.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. We are down one. Rebecca Murphey cannot join us, sadly, for this episode.
She's on the injured list for this week.
She is. Yeah, she's resting, and she'll be back for our next episode for sure. But we have a lot of really great stuff for you this time, so let's just dive right into it. Covering all the latest stuff that's going on, the jQuery cookbook by O'Reilly Media has just come out. I think it was published officially on November 26th, but you can now get it at your friendly local neighborhood Amazon.com and other places, I'm sure.
It is available for Pirate, and it was available before the official release, so we do request, as Rebecca is even a contributor to the book, that you do go out and purchase it, because it helps friendly JavaScript devs such as Rebecca Murphey.
It's really nice. There's a lot of really good. It's like a big collaborative effort. James Podolsky, Ralph Whitbeck, Jonathan Sharp, Jorn, Ariel Fleisler, Remy Sharp, Rebecca, Nathan Smith, Richard D. Worth, all these really well-known, talented jQuery developers contributed chapters to the book. So it's a real powerhouse of knowledge, and the reviews have already been really good. So it's definitely one to check out if you're looking to get some nice literature that can help you develop your next skills. So
absolutely,
peep that. The other thing that we just saw was that jQuery has officially joined the Software Freedom Conservancy. And so this is a nonprofit organization that is designed for helping to guide open source projects and all the legal issues that they may encounter, whether it's copyright, patents, all that. So jQuery is officially joined as the 90th member, and it's definitely a big milestone and one step on the way towards seeing jQuery as a very like official non-profit-y thing.
Altruistic.
What exactly does that mean, Paul? If you would elaborate.
I'm glad you asked. I think some of the goals that John Resig outlined in his State of jQuery talk was seeing a nonprofit that is responsible for the jQuery project. So the copyright of the code is actually to the nonprofit, and
where is it currently?
It's currently to John Resig and the jQuery team. But this will kind of clear out some of the ambiguity as far as intellectual property concerns are.
They also were trying to protect themselves from a bus. With this
a bus?
Yes,
the bus.
The proverbial
bus. The proverbial bus. So that's real exciting. And
let's not elaborate on that any further.
I have nothing.
And move on.
To say. Love to remind you guys about that you can always dial 443 for yayQuery. That is 443 for yayQuery to get in touch with us and leave us your comments, questions.
Adam, actually, I know we talked about before the episode. We asked you to put together all these really complicated notes that you usually do. I mean, I know you spend a lot of time on writing those legal pad documents that are totally awesome and everything, but actually our favored Jonathan Neal has written us a quick advert for our phone number, and we'll play it now.
You want to talk on the yayQuery party line? Dial 443-492-9783 or 443 for yayQuery. Go ahead, pick up that phone. We're waiting.
Okay, So there you go. We also just recently, actually a few minutes ago, had a submission. You can also contact us on Twitter, of course. And so we had a question from our friend who goes by the username Pause Absolute. He is a front-end developer in Montreal, Canada. And he asked us, what do you think of Lab.js as a front-end performance enhancement? Alex, why don't you take this?
Actually, I'm glad you asked me to take this. I happen to be a part of the Austin JavaScript meetup with Kyle Simpson, who is the creator of Lab.js. He helps run it with Joe McCann, who is also down here, and he's a great guy, and he would be thrilled that we're talking about Lab.js. I'm glad we got the question. So Lab.js, for anyone who doesn't know what Lab.js is a more sane approach to loading your dependencies with good performance. So currently, what you're doing to do that now is you're doing the open bracket script type equals text/JavaScript src equals URL close, whatever, that whole thing, right? And so that has been the staple of loading dependencies forever, and still probably will be for a while. However, Lab.js takes the ideas of a more modern approach into consideration. So what you're going to be doing with Lab.js is you actually write a small JavaScript bit, and we will link to the documentation so you can get syntax. But pretty much you're just saying, script open paren, and then you load your dependencies that way. And what Lab.js does is it takes everything that you need and it loads it all into all asynchronously. So your page continues to load. You have no blocking, which is the bane of performance, kind of. And it actually goes to great lengths to choose the fastest method. It's a very small framework-independent file that goes to very great lengths. Even so, if you tried out the beta version a while back, when it was on Ajaxian the first time, I think it just hit Ajaxian this week. It actually didn't take it didn't do pre-caching. So now it actually takes in Souter's recommendations. I was actually in a meeting with Souters and Kyle during the jQuery conference, and then they met again at, I believe, JSConf EU to kind of finalize merging a lot of the even faster websites code into Lab.js. So the release this week, or I think it was last week technically, the recent release of Lab.js is really cool because you get all of the stuff that Steve Souters talks about in his Even Faster Websites book, along with a bunch of extras that really, really, really speed up your load time. So we can get into more details through questions or something like that. But Adam, you have a question.
I have a question. I remember hearing that if I was using Lab.js, it would be weird when it came to document ready. I couldn't load jQuery using Lab.js.
So Lab.js actually doesn't have a problem itself. It's actually jQuery itself doesn't check. If you load jQuery after the document has already been ready, the document ready never fires. So it's actually something more universal to jQuery and other document ready items. There are several browsers that actually have a variable that says, the ready state is ready or not ready. And not all browsers have that, so there's kind of some tweaks that you have to do to get that working. So what they suggest is that you include jQuery, at least 1.3.2, with a regular script tag, and then you do your other stuff with Lab.js. That way you don't run into that same problem.
So I was wondering, I wanted to kind of give another push on this technique. Nicholas Zakis, who's on the YUI team, wrote Professional JavaScript, published by Rocks. Really, really smart guy. He had a post called "The Best Way to Load External JavaScript," and it was basically endorsing this technique of using a small bootloader script to basically load scripts instead of using script tags or whatever.
Right.
But then the other thing, and I guess this might be just a question, which is, when do I use something like lab.js or run.js? That's another similar script.
Right.
When do I use one of these versus just concatenating all the scripts that I have into one big file and then just throwing that in a script tag? Like, how do I know what to do there?
Right. Actually, most of it comes down to personal testing. The problem, and Kyle's a big advocate of the not one giant concatenated file at the end of your page. That actually is going to be worse performance because technically you're loading that all of that synchronously. Everything has to load in order in a giant concatenated file rather than having 4 to 5 files that all load asynchronously, all at the same time, all without blocking, and then they can run in any given order. So really, you kind of have to play with it yourself if you really want the utmost peak performance of that stuff. But actually, one giant concatenated file ends up being less performant. However, the Zakas article in the comments, it points out that lab.js might not be the best option because it does too much. The whole point is that you have to get to loading the JavaScript super fast, and that this is too big, even though it's a little over 4 kilobytes. Zakas makes a good point that if you really know what you're doing, you could write the exact specific JavaScript to exactly load exactly when you wanted and needed things. So if you really want to get the peak performance out, you should write something custom, right? But if you want a framework to kind of handle this for you, then I would gladly endorse lab.js as the fastest currently out there, as it uses the techniques from all of the previous fastest predecessors.
Yep, definitely. So the other thing that we just saw, a little bit ago, talking about CSS sprites, and then we saw some news from Cappuccino, the Cappuccino project, and they're using a really cool technique of using data URIs. So a data URI is a base64 encoded representation of some asset. So basically, you're taking like an image and using a textual representation of that image directly inline in your style sheet. So, Alex, you read about this with how Cappuccino is doing it?
Yeah. Cappuccino does pretty much exactly what you're talking about. Takes an image, turns it into base64. The problem with that in the past, I think a lot of us play with base64 stuff back when CSS started supporting that kind of stuff. I know, Paul, you talked about 2 years ago you're kind of doing that, but the problem with it has always been that IE is kind of the bane of everybody's existence, and it doesn't support that. However, MHTML, which is I don't really know the history, so don't quote me on much. But I know, like, if I save like a Word document as an HTML file, it comes out as an MHTML. It's some weird proprietary IE Microsoft thing.
It's this really weird thing, and there's Stoyan Stefanov who works for Yahoo did some research into it, and it's really crazy because you can actually kind of create a base64 representation of assets, include them in some weird syntax in a few different variants, and supply that to IE6 and IE7, and they'll pick it up. So you don't need to do extra HTTP requests. It's pretty crazy, and so we saw that in the Cappuccino example, and then also just most recently, Nicholas Zakas, again, he released a tool called CSS Embed, which does this exact thing of taking your images, converting them into base64, and then also has functionality to translate it into MHTML for your IA6 and IA7, whereas IA8 actually supports data URI, so you can just use that natively.
Right, and a lot of this stuff, they'll actually put this whole CSS file as some sort of variable or some multi-part of the actual JS file. So the JavaScript and the CSS and the images are all a single request, which again kind of goes against necessarily what you what might be the fastest way. It's definitely the easiest. Like jQuery UI, specifically, Richard Worth on the official jQuery podcast talked about how it would be super, super cool if, or actually I think it was John Resig on the first podcast, talked about how it would be so cool if jQuery UI could come as a single file. That would be actually really, really impressive. Like, you download a single file of jQuery UI and you're good to go. You don't have, to set up your structure or go change your CSS to a different folder and things like that. So that is a really cool notion. However, it might not be the most performant because all of your images download linearly with the CSS file.
So, cool. I wanted to give a quick shout out to a brand new front-end development blog that I just started following this last week. It is by Rob Flaherty. He's a developer in New York City, and his site is ravelrumba.com. That's R-A-V-E-L rumba.com. Just a lot of great stuff. He actually talks about CSS embed. He has a really nice HTML template for email. A lot of really cool stuff. Smart guy, knows what he's talking about, and definitely someone to watch, someone to follow, and add that to your feed reader.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. And the other thing was just this week, I, along with 3 other developers, designers, launched a new project called Type Rendering, and essentially the goal of it is to make sure that web fonts look good. Currently using CSS3 at font face, there's a lot of possibilities, and it's a really exciting space to be in, but things can look bad sometimes. And so we're really interested in how to basically maximize the quality that you can squeeze out of using rich typography online. We've done a lot of research and are eager to share that with the community and get everyone involved so that we can push this thing forward. So definitely follow Type Rendering on Twitter so you can see more about that.
Yeah, it's really cool. You guys released a detection for smooth fonts. Is that what it was?
Yeah, basically it detects to see if your OS has font smoothing enabled, and it does a few really nifty, cool techniques to do that. But I'll let you guys check that out.
That's great. Yeah, that'll be in the link section, I guess.
For sure. We also just saw the release of Jabs, and so Jabs is a little abstracted jQuery syntax library, and I kind of liken it to Haml, like what Haml is to HTML, Jabs is to jQuery. So it's basically an abstracted, higher level syntax in which you can write jQuery-like code, but without all of the things that are so redundant of writing your anonymous functions and all that.
It almost looks like Python.
Yeah, it totally does. It's really cool, and I think it would be awesome if it was just like you could write things really fast. But my take on it is that I feel like it's easy enough to make a syntax error using this new custom Jabs syntax that I don't think you would actually probably save any development time, save any efficiency.
Yeah. It might be prettier in the long run.
You'd have to be writing such terse jQuery to begin with, and then also what if you have something that doesn't quite translate? It seemed to me like you're saving a little bit of time coding theoretically, but you have to make this whole extra level of translation.
Right. It's actually based off of a thing John Resig posted, I think, a while back. It's ejon.org/apps/jQuery2.
Yeah, it's jQuery squared is basically his idea.
So it's kind of an implementation of that, and he calls that out on his GitHub page. And yeah, I think it's a cool idea. I'm not sure it has a lot of application in the real world though.
But it is pretty similar to another thing that we just saw recently that's been getting a lot of attention, which is Zen coding. And so this erupted from an article on Smashing Magazine, and it's a way of creating HTML as essentially a macro in your IDE, and you create it by writing CSS selectors.
Yeah, and there's this little extra stuff added on there, like multiplication of how many you want, things like that. But pretty much if you know CSS, you could pick it up pretty quickly. Have any of you guys tried it at all?
Well, it sounds a lot like, what's it called? James Podolsky's Satisfy plugin, which lets you do the exact same thing on the client side.
Right, yeah. So the difference there would be that Podolsky's Satisfy, you can kind of build HTML in your page with that, whereas this is just like a development tool. One is actually used to build stuff, and which is Satisfy, and then Zen coding is like a little faster to help you develop. I almost think that I would spend longer time, thinking of the selector than I would actually just typing out the markup.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Oh yeah. Also, another thing that kind of peeves me, I guess, about the whole Gabs thing is, it reminds me a lot of a couple plugins you guys might be familiar with, Fly DOM and DOM EC, which are both plugins that provide kind of like a MooTools style way of creating elements on the fly. I've never really been too partial to use it to that style of coding because I think that jQuery provides a really neat way of doing that. Some people hate the idea of HTML and strings. I have learned to live with it, but I think to embrace it. I think that jQuery really is great at taking a big old chunk of string that you can build up programmatically for sure, and turn it pretty quickly into a collection of DOM elements, and save yourself weird methods like create append and all these nested objects and arrays with properties, which is like just a whole, again, abstraction on top of jQuery, which if it suits your fancy, then fine, but we've got a pretty good library here doing its work.
Right. And so this actually used to be a little bit different in older versions of jQuery, but now it's far more faster and far more performant to actually pass a big string of HTML into the dollar function and have it create the DOM versus passing like a structured object that represents DOM that you want to create to these plugins. So definitely embrace HTML as a string and pass that into dollar. Don't feel bad about it because it's actually very quick and performant. So it's definitely your best bet.
And we're definitely not against using a templating from John Resig or from Underscore or something like that. If you have a lot of HTML that you're using, like definitely it needs to have some sort of structure. But if you're using a little or anything like that, don't be afraid to write a little bit in your code, even if you put it at the top if you feel bad about it or something like that.
But here's the question, though. I know that what those plugins are leveraging, though, is the fact that the core DOM element creation methods, document create element, is theoretically super fast. If I run that, then I'm going to pass that off to jQuery. It's going to wrap up a DOM element. It's going to be fast as can be. Why not just do that?
Yeah, I can speak on that if you want. The document.createElement div, right, is going to create a div the fastest that you can create a div. A lot of times something will create a document fragment, and then they'll add the div to the document fragment, and then remove it, and that's slow. But jQuery actually has, especially in the newer versions, something that finds that and actually converts it directly to a document.createElement div. So it's a very small micro optimization to change your code from just the string div to the document.createElement div. It'd be the same as passing document.getElementById into the thing. You just bypass the selector engine if you really, it's fast enough. If you need that optimization, write it semantically and then go back through and search and replace div with document.createElementDiv.
You probably have a bigger bottleneck somewhere.
Right, yeah. I would hope, I mean, if you don't, congratulations, but you can search and replace and gain your millisecond. So, next up, I think we wanted to talk about something. I was recently at the Austin JS meetup again, which for any of you in Austin, I would suggest going to. Just follow Austin JS on Twitter. One of our members is Andrew DuPont, who is a Scriptaculous dev, has done a lot of work with Prototype.
Core Prototype developer, yeah.
He is super smart, and I'm glad to have him in the Austin JS crew. He has a lot of great anecdotes about old school people that wasn't even into programming whenever they were talking. So he's a good guy. Follow him on Twitter as well. I'm not sure. We'll post his Twitter URL in there. But he showed us something pretty cool, and that is Scripty2 has recently, I'm not even sure if it's released, but there's a lot of it's not officially released. I don't even know. So. It's not officially released, but there's a lot of stuff for Scripty2 right now. It's a complete rewrite of the Scriptaculous stuff, right? And so he was doing UI elements, right? And a lot of us work with jQuery UI, and he showed us that the Scripty2 stuff actually uses what's called the jQuery UI CSS framework in order to leverage jQuery UI themes, right? So you can actually use a theme roller on the Scripty2 UI elements. So you want to accordion. You can use a theme roller and roll a Scripty2. That's not jQuery. It totally takes jQuery out of it. All you're using is a theme roller in the jQuery UI CSS framework, right?
So wait. This is Scripty2, which is based on Prototype.
Right.
Has nothing to do with jQuery.
Zero.
But it's using basically the CSS class framework from the jQuery UI CSS, so that you can use that.
Yeah. Essentially, it would bypass jQuery entirely and use Prototype plus Scripty2, and you would get the user experience or the functionality of Scripty2. So if they have, say, for instance, they're newer and they come out with better ARIA support and better tab support and stuff like that, all that would be implemented the same. It would all have the prototype stuff like that, but it would look like it was theme rolled, and you could run the theme roller, and you could download the CSS files straight from jQueryui.com and load that file in. But also, it actually has its own theme, so it has its own unique look, because as much as we love the jQuery UI stuff, it can get pretty stagnant as far as what you can change. But I think we'll move on.
But
Adam.
like that, the fact that I'm going to end up seeing the same exact class names, whether or not I'm using jQuery UI or Prototype and Scriptaculous or Scripty2. I mean, that sounds like it's a hidden
Hidden
They're hidden enhancements.
What?
The little tiny things you never thought you'd see.
Oh.
So the reason I think it's hidden is because, the very idea that you can work with those classes is maybe something that you've stumbled across if you've worked with jQuery UI CSS framework, and you have wanted to make the rest of your application kind of look like that theme. You kind of end up saying, header active, I've got one of those. This all kind of works. Alex, you seem to have...
Yeah, I have a question. That's why. Yeah. You keep talking about a jQuery UI CSS framework. That's the hidden enhancement. So this is essentially like a faux standard that jQuery UI has created in order to work on their own stuff, but is now kind of bridging that gap, and it's not necessarily documented. Is that what's the deal with that?
Well, it's kind of, a lot of goodness, in fact, is hidden away on our
hidden wiki,
which is the jQuery UI wiki, which you can find at wiki.jQueryui.com, which is the development wiki for the entire jQuery UI project. They have
extremely
useful, fun. It's a really great way to get involved with jQuery UI if you want to, because things are happening in real time, and if you want to jump in, it's a lot easier to get your feedback into a plugin that's not done yet than one that you found a bug in the stable release 4 months after it's been out, because people are going to be paying attention. They're looking for that, and you can stumble across some really interesting stuff. There's Filament Group's Select Menu plugin, which
super awesome.
Is great. Filament Group released that themselves, saying this is ready to go, but you can find that on there. There's a button plugin. There's some utility plugins that we talked about a few weeks ago, like the positioning thing. There's tooltips that are coming along, but even you've got the newest versions of the jQuery UI plugins. So a lot of people remember autocomplete, which sort of magically disappeared in the 1.6 phase of jQuery UI. It's there and it's going strong on the wiki. It's been under some really aggressive and tender development from, again, Jorn Zafer.
Adam, is the autocomplete plugin, I think it's the plugin of the week, and it's really, really great. It's the plugin of the week. Yeah! What is kind of the progression of the autocomplete plugin so far?
Well, let me tell you all about it. So Jorn Zafer, Bassistance.de, is a jQuery plugin developer. He's been around for a long time. He's coded some of the most solid plugins out there, like Tooltip, Autocomplete, Validate, which Microsoft ships.
Yep.
So it's pretty legit developer and a great guy for asset to the jQuery community. So he's been working on autocomplete since forever ago, and it's moved into the jQuery UI project. It looked like it's going to make it into 1.8 right now because it didn't make it into the alpha, but there's still hope for it. But the jQuery autocomplete plugin is pretty much, we would all say, the plugin you want to be using for autocomplete. It's super stable, it works really, really well, and I just feel comfortable when I'm using one of Jorn's plugins. I know that a lot of time and thought and testing went into doing it. I know Jorn works on unit testing framework. So, now the thing is, one little useful tip. Paul?
No, go ahead.
A useful thing that a lot of people don't know about, though, autocomplete, is it does actually parse JSON if you're getting it from the server. It's sometimes a little bit difficult to figure out for people, how do I do that? It seems to only want to take pipe delimited data. There's actually a parse callback hidden deep inside of autocomplete.
Is this a hidden enhancement?
This is a hidden enhancement. So the parse callback, which I'll try to find some linking to, at least the source of the autocomplete plugin.
line
numbers. Lets you kind of transform your JSON into the format that autocomplete needs. In the UI 1.8, whatever, they're going to have a lot more versatility in terms of handling data sources. So that's something to look forward to.
Cool. I guess this is the time for
All Irish's jQuery anti-pattern for performance of the week. Bum, bum.
Okay, so this week's anti-pattern is don't act on absent elements. Okay, so this is something that jQuery is really nice to you. jQuery doesn't yell at you when you try and do something to an element that doesn't exist. So if you grab an element, like let's say that you grab some element with an ID of doesn't exist because it doesn't exist, and then you try and fade it in, it actually goes through a lot of different functions. It goes through speed and animate and genFX before it finally hits in each function, where it then realizes that there are no elements that it's actually dealing with, and then it quits. That's a lot of overhead for something that doesn't happen at all. So
sad.
It is. So there's one thing that you can do as a developer to basically prevent this, and which is check to make sure that your selection has a length before you actually do something with it. If you're not sure, given the circumstances. There's also a plugin, a really trivial plugin called Do Once that I wrote. It's trivial, but it basically checks to make sure that there is a length, and then if there is a length, it's going to execute whatever you pass to it. If you're a plugin developer, I would recommend one of the very first things that you do inside your plugin code is check to see if there is if the length of what's been passed in is 0, and if there's nothing that's been passed in, just return this and let the chain continue, and have all your your extend options line after that. So it's just the top thing, just exit really quickly if nothing hasn't been passed in. That way it'll be as fast as possible for anything that just doesn't need to happen.
It's like a whistle in Mario.
Yeah. All right. So I guess, guys, is it about time to wrap this up? Do you think?
Let's wrap it up.
I'm pretty sure that it's off to our code. I mean, I know that I have code that I have to.
I've got to get back to my node.
Yeah, back to the DOM. We will check you out next week. Thank you for joining us. Rebecca will join us next week. We thank Rebecca. Give thanks again to our sponsors, TinyCDN and Devotee. And
happy Advent.